if you're leading an organization, where are you going to go? What do you believe in? What's your purpose? And these are the kinds of questions and thoughtful reflections and answers that are going to help you figure that out and lead an organization.
Technology is transforming how we think, how we lead, and how we win. From InterVision, this is Status Go, the show helping IT leaders move beyond the status quo, master their craft, and propel their IT vision.
Chaos, a great way to describe 2020. Chaos. It is important for leaders to know how to lead through chaos through multiple challenges. We have faced chaotic times, and yes, I hate to break it to you, we will face them again. This is your host, Jeff Tunn, and you are listening to Status Go. Today, I'm joined by Sean Murray, the CEO of RealTime Performance in Seattle, Washington. RealTime Performance has been working with companies for over 20 years to assess and develop their leaders. Their clients include some of the biggest brands in the world. We're going to talk about leadership in chaos, leadership and brand, and then talk about why that is important to you as a technology leader. Sean is also the host of the podcast, The Good Life, where he explores topics related to personal growth, development, and leading a meaningful, flourishing life. The show focuses on the most important investment we all make, investing our time wisely to get the most out of life. Welcome to the show, Sean.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on, Jeff.
I'm excited about our conversation today, Sean. I think our audience is really going to enjoy some of the insights that you bring today. As we dive in, I want to talk a little bit more about your work. You've been helping to develop leaders for 20 years. How is 2020 different? How is it the same?
Well, we'll start with the different piece. Feels a lot different, looks a lot different. With COVID, we're in unprecedented times, uncharted territory, we all know. And so there's no map to follow. There's no script. It feels different than the other crises I've dealt with my own business and helping leaders that I work with. The dot-com bubble, the great financial crisis and so forth feels different because it really, there's no script on how we're going to work through this. And it's impacting each industry in a different way. I'm working with a client in the timber products industry, and how it impacts that industry is going to be different than, say, a client in the hotel or hospitality industry. I'll give you a quick example. I was just last week visiting my cousin who runs a small resort in Oregon, and it's on a lake and it's in a fairly remote place, and she's doing great business. She's having the best year she's ever had because people are coming up from California. People aren't traveling to Europe, so she's doing quite well. But another client of mine, Marriott, who I've worked with for years, they're really struggling right now. So even in the same industry, you just don't know.
Yeah, so that's interesting.
Yeah, it's quite different industry to industry. But what hasn't changed is human psychology and the things that drive us, our desire to have security and safety for our families and our friends and our community, the desire to be a part of something, a community, a tribe. We want to be accepted. We want to be respected by others. I go back to Daniel Pink's work when I think about what hasn't changed. And he wrote the book Drive, and he talks about mastery, autonomy, and purpose as three key drivers for human psychology. And that's the kind of stuff, Jeff, that hasn't changed. The human psychology will be with us, and we'll need to work with that. What's going on in the external environment is often out of our control, and we have to navigate through that, and we will. But we will rely on the same sort of human psychology that's been with us for millennia.
It's kind of the way that we react to the chaos around us, right? And different people react in different ways. And so I imagine as you've been working with your clients, just like you were talking a moment ago about different industries and the impact is different. I imagine your clients are reacting to the chaos differently. So, in a year where everyone's gotten disrupted, what's been your counsel to some of your clients?
Well, one thing that I think is really important when you're going through something like this is to carve out some time to do some original thinking. One of my favorite essays in the last 10 years was by William Dershowitz. He was giving a speech to the pleb class at West Point. It's about 2010, and you can find the speech. Maybe we'll put a link to it if you can in your notes. It was published in the American Scholar. But what he told these young leaders, and William Dershowitz was a instructor at the time at West Point, was you got to have time to solitude, to listen to your own thoughts.
Mhm.
And he had a very interesting observation. He said, my first thought is rarely an original thought. It's when I sit and think, make connections to past experiences, to future projections, to looking at analogies, giving my subconscious time to sink in. It's when all of that happens, when I have space and quiet to do that, is when I come up with an original thought. And I think we need original thinking to navigate through this, to kind of go back to what I was saying before about how it's impacting industries in different ways. You can read about how Jeff Bezos is managing through the COVID crisis at Amazon, or you can read about Elon Musk and how he's going to lead Tesla through this. But that's not going to give you your playbook, your script.
Right.
You as a leader really need to make sure you've got some time to think through your own situation and lead your organization through that. And it's going to take solitude. It's going to take some reflection, probably some writing, some thoughtful conversation with your peers and those around you. And that's where the innovative ideas are going to come from.
Isn't it funny how something as valuable as that reflection and really taking that time to think through the situation, we don't set aside enough time to do that. We get caught up in the busyness of the day or the week, and we rarely have time to carve out for that. How do you work with your clients to help them manage that part of their job, their career, being able to carve that time out?
Well, you're exactly right. I mean, we are bombarded by information, by requests for our time, disruption. We're asked to do a lot of multitasking. And all of this runs counter to what we were just talking about, kind of that deep reflection and thought.
Mhm.
And so without carving out the time, without being proactive about how you're going to invest that time, you'll find that it's easily taken from you. Your people need your time, especially in IT. You know, I work with IT leaders. It's just the demand on their time and the requests that come in is just unprecedented. So how do we do it? If you think about what's important, and this is where the leadership, you know, your role as a leader really comes to the forefront, is if you're leading an organization, where are you going to go? What do you believe in? What's your purpose? And these are the kinds of questions and thoughtful reflections and answers that are going to help you figure that out and lead an organization. And unless you're taking the time to do that, where is it going to come from? And so I think it starts with just an honest assessment of, you know, what do I need to get through this crisis? How am I going to do that? And if I don't have the solitude, if I don't have the time to process and think and reflect, where's that leadership going to come from? Where am I going to hold on to my foundation? Where's my foundation? And I think once you make that intellectual leap and that understanding that you need that foundation, then you'll have the fortitude to carve out that time, because it is hard to do. You have to push things out of the way. You have to put things off to have that solitude. And just from a practical purpose, put it on your calendar and secure it and make sure that no one Put that hour, put that half hour, whatever it is. Maybe start with a half hour if you think it's a challenge, and make sure it's on your calendar and protect it, and know that that is the most important time for you this week, is to make sure you have that half hour, and then again put it on the calendar next week so that you make sure that that's a part of your day.
Do you run into a problem with balance, that perhaps someone spends too much time in that reflection and they're not taking action in the face of chaos, or has that not been an issue?
I think that's always a challenge. There's going to be a balance to reflection versus action. I find that in today's world, it's more, the default is that we are in the reactive mode, that we are being asked to answer emails, we're being asked to sit in on meetings, we're being asked to invest our time in various activities that are kind of moving our organizations forward. And it takes that's almost like gravity. You have to kind of work against the gravity to carve the time out to reflect. You
Yeah.
know, can you be in too much of a reflective mode? Absolutely. And I think the key there is, are you making progress on your goals? Reflection is kind of, where am I going? How am I going to get there? And the activity is making progress. And if we're not making progress, we don't feel successful. We don't feel confident in our growth. So we will be getting the message somehow through our emotions and our feelings, and probably through our progress reports and things like that from our peers. But it is really, really important to find that time in an age like today.
Yeah, where it's just constant barrage of information. So let's do a bit of a pivot. You've worked with some of the iconic brands in the world. When you talk of brand, what do you mean? And then as a follow-up, why is brand an important part of leadership?
Well, the word originally comes from the markings that we would put onto domesticated animals. If you
Mhm.
go all the way back, it's a marking that says this animal belongs to a certain individual, or to a certain ranch, or to a certain tribe, and so forth. And what a brand has evolved into is something that signifies a community, something that signifies a purpose or something bigger than yourself. And the reason brands can be so critical in a time like this is a brand can help you navigate through, and can help propel you through challenging times. Every organization is going to face a challenge at some point. And the stronger the brand, the more wind at your sails to help you through a challenging time. One of the mentors in my career, one of my mentors is a gentleman named Scott Bedbury, and he was at Nike as a young director of advertising in the 1980s, when Nike, working with an advertising agency, Wieden & Kennedy, developed the Just Do It campaign, and got a front row seat into, in fact, he wrote the brief for Wieden & Kennedy to develop that Just Do It campaign, and got to help Phil Knight build a global brand in Nike. And then he left and went to Starbucks and helped Howard Schultz, a small little coffee company here in Seattle called Starbucks, and he helped Howard Schultz build that brand, probably with about 1/100th of the marketing budget, by the way. And they built another brand. He's recently working with Airbnb. But Scott's been a mentor of mine. And one thing I do recommend is getting a mentor in another function. If you're in finance, get a mentor in marketing, or if you're in IT, maybe get a mentor in another area of the organization. So Scott's been a great mentor, and one of the things he taught me was the power of purpose in a brand.
Mhm.
And at Nike, they have a mission statement. The mission statement is to inspire the athlete in all of us, and everyone is an athlete, by the way. So being a part of something bigger. When Phil Knight started Nike, he didn't understand that mission. He thought the mission of the organization was to make shoes and distribute shoes,
Mhm.
running shoes for elite athletes. And it wasn't until over time, really understanding what the brand was all about, that they developed this idea that was about inspiring the athlete in all of us. It was something much bigger than just making shoes. And I think that's an important lesson we can take if you're working in IT, if you're working in finance and HR in any area of the organization. How are you helping the mission of the organization? How are you helping and furthering the purpose of why you exist and tapping into the power of that? It's it can help you through a challenge like COVID, and it can help you as a leader to develop your team and develop your people.
I think you've nailed it really well, Sean, with your description of brand and that higher purpose. So I'd love to understand, do you in your work, do you get into people's personal brand? Do you get at that level as a part of the overall corporate brand?
Absolutely. I think it's a good investment for each individual to spend time thinking about their own purpose. And that's something we talk about on the Good Life podcast. But it's also something I work with leaders on to understand, what do you see as your own individual mission statement? Why do you exist here on earth? What do you want to do with your time? And it could involve activities and goals outside of work, absolutely. But understanding that in how your personal mission statement fits with your organizational mission statement is going to help you become a better leader. When it gets down to what you value and how you can draw on those values to further the mission, that's where people get a lot of inspiration, they get a lot of motivation, and it can help you navigate, your leadership style, how you lead, and lift the spirit of the organization or the team you work with. So that, if you just take an example of IT, let's go back to Nike for a second. If you're working in the Nike IT organization, you may be porting your servers over to AWS, and it may be a big project that you're working on. And if you just think about it in terms of IT, it can be challenging, right? Or it can become monotonous, or it can become just one more project in hundreds. But if you think about it as a way to inspire the athlete in all of us in some way, to get people off the couch, to help people um, become a better person in some way by channeling the inner athlete inside, it becomes something that people want to be a part of, that people can get behind. And I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, and I think it especially is important if your personal values and your personal goals align with the brand that you're working for, right? If you can have that in your life, I think you're going to value and appreciate the time at work much more than if there's a disconnect. Would you agree with that? And have you seen that in your work?
Absolutely. And the leaders that I've worked with at some of these iconic brands, if they can connect their own personal brand, their own personal mission to the greater organizational mission, they it becomes much more natural, the leadership style. And it's like fuel. You get some fuel um, to express yourself and to be an authentic leader. And all of these aspects of leadership are important if you want to communicate, how you work with others. All of this becomes a part of something bigger, and you tap into something much much deeper. If those in the audience are interested in more regarding this kind of personal mission and purpose, there's a book I recommend called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And Viktor Frankl was a psychologist, a Jewish psychologist working in Vienna before World War II. And when World War II broke out, He was eventually sent to a concentration camp. He ended up at Auschwitz, but he survived. And as he went through this horrific experience, he observed what was going on in his own mind and in the prisoners around him. And one of the key takeaways from that experience, and he wrote a beautiful short book called Man's Search for Meaning when he got out of the and survived the concentration camp. But one of the key takeaways was this idea of purpose and individual purpose. He looked around and he noticed that if a prisoner had a purpose, something greater than themselves, it could have been an artwork they were working on, or a wife or a child that they were separated from, that they were holding out hope, or they needed to survive to help that family member through this experience. Whatever it was, if they could tap into something, then they had a much greater chance of survival. If they lost that purpose, if the purpose was external to themselves, like, some prisoners would say, if I can just hold on until Christmas, then I'll be fine. But that's sort of an external marker. It's not an intrinsic goal, and they wouldn't make it. And so, if you want to get a little insight into the power of purpose, I think it's a great book, and it can help you if you do want to go into that reflective mode, reading something like that, and then reflecting a little bit on your own life. We're not going to go through something like Viktor Frankl did, but we're going through our own challenges, and tapping into that is going to be, critical.
Well, Sean, our audience members are tech leaders, either working in the tech sector itself or perhaps in corporate IT. And I know in your work, you've worked with technology pros that run kind of that spectrum. Let's tie these concepts of leading in chaos and brand back to their roles specifically. So, what things do you work with IT professionals on related to leading in chaos and brand?
Well, one thing is relationships, and the IT leaders I work with, one of the focuses we've talked about is developing relationships and being consultative with those that they work with. And by that I mean, listening, having empathy, um, developing solutions that further that relationship in some way. If you think about IT as a means to further a purpose in an organization, it really becomes a way to empower people. And to do that, you need a relationship with the people you work with. So often in organizations I've worked with, or in the past, IT has been the department of no.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you want a new computer? No. I'd really like to have this Salesforce on my. No, we're not going with Salesforce. We're going, and it's, I have a project of an innovative idea. If we could just add something to our website, no, that's going to have to get in the back of the line. This can be real stifling for innovation. It can be stifling for furthering the mission of the organization. So, looking at each of the clients you work with within an organization as a relationship that can be developed is a powerful way to develop an IT organization that's really going to deliver on the mission. And that means listening. It means being empathetic. It means understanding the business challenges people face. You may have to say no in some way along the way. We all do, but it's how you do it. And it's building the relationship and the trust with those people that not only can fuel your kind of inner fire for leadership and give you a greater purpose, but it can help your organization become an IT organization that furthers a mission rather than just moving bits and bytes around.
And that's hard for the IT professional, and I assume many other, I'll call them the back office skills in things like finance, HR, IT, all of those types of divisions or departments, I think probably have a similar problem in that it's difficult to always tie your day to day back to the broader mission or vision of the company. Are there things that you can recommend to the IT professional that would help them with that tie back to the overall mission vision?
That's absolutely right. And just kind of going back to how we started this interview, I talked about my mentor, Scott Bedbury, and working in marketing organizations. The reason that we got connected is he recognized that if an organization is really going to achieve its mission, each of those functions within an organization needs to understand how they contribute. And one of the key functions is human resources and leadership. And so he would bring me in on these projects to help an organization understand how the HR systems and how the talent development and leadership can align with the mission. And it's as simple as asking people to make the connection and helping them make the connection. Taking some time in a meeting or an offsite or a workshop and asking your team to reflect on how are we furthering the mission? What is our mission and how are we furthering that by what we're doing? It may sound kind of banal, it may sound repetitive. Oh, people kind of already know that. But my experience is that people generally don't spend a lot of time reflecting on that or making the connection. And part of the job of the leader is to connect those dots for them, or to give people the space to connect the dots so that people understand not just what they need to do, but why what they're doing is so important.
It gets back to the topic we started about at the beginning, which was reflection and taking the time. If you're not in a leadership role, perhaps that reflection time is spent understanding how you connect to the broader mission. I think that's a great point, Sean.
Absolutely.
So I've got a surprise question for you. For our listeners, Sean and I have been working on a project for almost a year now to develop a leadership development program based on, believe it or not, Lewis and Clark. So, Sean, here's your surprise question. When you think about brand, what's the brand of the Lewis and Clark expedition?
Wow, that's a great question. If you think about brand, what's the brand of the Lewis and Clark expedition? Well, as it's passed down to us today and our legacy, to me, the brand of that mission is exploration and discovery.
Mhm.
It taps into, any great brand is going to tap into some deep psyche of the human psychology. Our need to belong, to be part of a tribe is part of that. That's kind of the Nike ethos in Starbucks and just do it. But I would put the Lewis and Clark expedition in a different part of the human psyche that's tapping into, which is something that's also deeply embedded in our human experience, which is curiosity
Mhm.
and exploration. It's the same brand that propelled us to the moon and propelled humankind to step on the moon for the first time. And Lewis and Clark really exhibit that. And if you go back through the different kind of crises that the leaders in that expedition faced, you'll see they definitely tapped into that mission and that brand at times to help them through the crisis.
Absolutely, absolutely. A lot of what we've talked about today uh, can tie back to some of the lessons from that expedition. And I love how you brought out curiosity and exploration, because I think that ties directly to our listeners, the IT professional, the technology professional. One of the things that drives us in our pursuits of technology is that curiosity and the exploration of what is possible. So that's a fantastic tie back, Sean. As you know, here on Status Go, we are all about action. And so before we wrap, what are one or two things our listeners should do tomorrow because they listened to us today?
Well, the first one, we've talked about it, but it's just take 10 minutes tomorrow. It could be at the beginning of your day, you got your cup of coffee, sitting down at your desk, maybe your home office, and just allow yourself time to listen to your own thoughts and think through, kind of making the connection back to COVID. How are you navigating through COVID, helping your organization work through COVID, through your current situation? And, like William Dershowitz says in that speech, your first thought is often not an original one. And give yourself time to really reflect and think through how you can do it. No one's going to write the script for you in your particular area of your organization and your industry. It's really up to you. And that's your role as a leader, no matter where you are in the organization. So spend some time, reflect. I often encourage people to write down those thoughts because they will slip away. So, and the act of writing will help you reflect. So that's one thing. And if I had to give one other piece of advice, it's go back to your mission statement in your organization. Dig it out. Maybe you know it by heart because it's something that people talk about all the time in your organization, or maybe it's sort of buried and it's not as accessible as you might want it to be. But dig it out, find it, read it, and ask yourself how you're aligning with that mission, how you're furthering that mission, how your team is furthering that mission. So many great insights can come from that question and that reflection. It can help you determine how you're going to lead, can help you communicate to your team and make connections to a greater purpose, which is going to be inspiring and motivating. It may even open some insights into where you should be spending your time and potential innovation and creativity and discovery. So those are two activities I highly recommend, Jeff.
Sean, that is great advice for our listeners. And I really want to thank you for being on our show today. I so much enjoy chatting with you. I feel like I come away from every conversation with new nuggets of wisdom, new insights. So I really appreciate you sharing those with our audience today.
Well, thank you for having me on the show. I really enjoyed the conversation as well, Jeff.
To our listeners, if you have a question or want to know more, go to intervision.com. The show notes will provide links and contact information. And I think we'll be able to put some links to the speech and perhaps the books that Sean mentioned as well for the show notes. This is Jeff Tunn for Sean Murray. Thank you very much for listening.
You've been listening to the Status Go podcast. You can subscribe on iTunes or get more information at intervision.com. If you'd like to contribute to the conversation, find Intervision on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter. Thank you for listening. Until next time.